Billionaires do not react to headlines, but prepare before they appear.
Headlines are the end, not the beginning. They are the final stage of information, not the initial spark. Real power operates in earlier, quieter layers. Today, we're introducing the concept of private signals as subtle, measurable shifts.
As you can see, the signals appear long before the narratives form.
So how do we leverage this in a noisy world? It comes down to this simple equation. Attention determines advantage. Billionaires train themselves to notice patterns others ignore.
We observe behavior instead of statements.
We find ourselves constantly reacting because we fail to identify the underlying drivers. This cycle of reactive statements prevents strategic progress. I want to introduce the concept of capital movement as the first signal we need to address today.
This movement happens before public fear spreads.
The presenter transitions into how slowing investment reveals caution.
So how does hesitation tie into internal forecasting? It stems from uncertainty, which our brains flag as a risk.
Boardroom behavior sends strong signals. As you can see here, that means prioritizing active listening and fostering respectful dialogue in every interaction.
Fewer public appearances often indicate internal planning.
This data clearly clarifies that a reduced exposure level, visualized here, directly results in protected positioning.
Looking ahead to Q3, business as usual is no longer an option. We need decisive action to maintain our competitive edge in the market. As you can see on the graph, language measurement, things like precision and formality, tend to increase significantly over time right before a major shift occurs. By acknowledging these shifts in market perception now, we can ensure the future restructuring maximizes our growth potential. This brings me to the crucial adjustments in our supply chain strategy. We're seeing immediate shifts, particularly in the European and Asian corridors. The key takeaway here is that order volumes consistently show a subtle decrease in advance of these economic slowdowns. We must focus on these early adjustments now. That is the only way to prevent the potential losses you see here. As we transition into the management patterns, let's look closer at the just-in-time approach. Notice how JIT impacts these key areas of the supply chain. The direct correlation is clear. Efficient inventory management, as demonstrated in this graph, flows directly into turning our attention to hiring decisions. You can see the significant upward trend driven by focusing on the right talent and tools. This data clearly shows that hiring freezes, indicated by the blue line, consistently appear months before we see the impact on layoffs here.
Talent retention becomes a priority during uncertainty.
As we transition into the strategic overview, I want to highlight the importance of aligning our salary bands with the new performance incentives framework.
As we evolve our bonus structures, the focus is quietly shifting towards performance safety, prioritizing sustained results and risk mitigation.
The key takeaway is the correlation between how we structure compensation and the resulting impact on enterprise risk awareness.
And gin larfragents. Delayed enforcement signals pending shifts.
Policy silence often means negotiation.
And this brings me to the core point. Lobbying intensity acts as a clear signal, especially when it reaches this peak level shown here in red.
Increased private meetings reveal coming change.
The insights gathered from these private discussions, the stakeholder meetings and confidential consultations, are crucial.
We've discussed the overall strategies, but true protection comes down to behavior, and that's what we'll dive into next. As diversification increases, as shown here on the left, we consistently see volatility spike shortly thereafter.
Protection comes before explanation.
This brings us to the geographic capital flow. Notice how these routes illustrate the interconnectedness of the global markets, particularly between these key cities.
It's a pattern we observe time and again. Wealth begins moving out of a region long before the headlines ever mention instability.
These regional shifts, particularly in Southeast Asia and Latin America, are the driving force behind the long-term forecast models we see here. Now, let's dive into currency hedging. As you can see from the USD-EUR trends here, managing volatility is crucial. Hedging activity precedes currency headline spikes.
Liquidity management is crucial. It connects directly to how we handle cash flow, manage debt, assess risk, and ultimately drive investment strategy.
Cash positions increase before market corrections.
Liquidity growth is fundamentally a defensive strategy. Let me show you how the current market trends support this view. Transitioning now to the core strategies. As you can see here, refinancing plays a critical role in effective debt restructuring.
We are urging you to act on refinancing now. Credit conditions are tightening, and this opportunity window won't last.
Proactive debt management prevents crisis exposure. Now, moving into the cornerstone of our discussion today, partnership behavior. It's all about building trust and ensuring mutual success for everyone involved. As you can see from the graph, fewer joint ventures directly correlate with significant risk reduction. This trend is crucial for our strategy moving forward.
This is why partnership caution is critical. As the data shows, these uncertainty signals are increasing exponentially across the network.
This brings me to the core of my talk today, media exposure reduction. And as this data visualization...
As you can see from the data, billionaires tend to speak significantly less during sensitive market shifts.
In bold point, silence protects leverage.
Now that we've covered the business metrics, let's talk about something equally important, philanthropic timing. This is where we make a real difference.
Visible donations may increase before scrutiny rises.
The key takeaway here is the timing. When we align our philanthropy efforts early, we see a direct correlation with
Let's move on to the insider transaction patterns. As you can see from the volume data below, the activity here is signaling a major shift.
Notice how the insider holdings shift dramatically, both up and down, just before the official announcement dates shown here.
As you can see here, patterns matter more than single trades. Focus on the overall trend, not just one transaction.
This brings me to our next key strategy, strategic patience. As the graph illustrates, this approach is vital for sustainable growth.
Waiting is often a calculated position. The connection is undeniable. Organizational patience translates directly into superior capital strength and sustainable growth. Now that we understand the framework, let's dive into the cornerstone of success, emotional discipline. It starts with self-awareness. Calmness is not accidental. It is engineered through meticulous preparation.
I want to clarify this point. Panic indicates a lack of positioning. If you are positioned correctly, you won't panic.
Now, let's dive into the history of these incredible patterns.
As you can see on the screen, these Celtic knots are
If we look closely, past crises like the 2008 meltdown or the dot-com bubble burst reveal recurring signals in the data. And this data clearly shows the correlation. As we increase repetition along this axis, our forecasting confidence rises dramatically. Transitioning now to the structural indicators. As you can see, these metrics provide deep insight into the current market trends.
You can see the slowdown in infrastructure investment. This downward trend historically indicates a coming market contraction.
Expansion pauses predict caution. Turning now to merger activity. We saw a substantial rise in global M&A during the third quarter, clearly indicating a resurgence in the market. This data clearly illustrates that the M&A acquisition rate decelerates significantly just before the market experiences a downturn.
All right. Timing these consolidation phases is key. By entering and exiting correctly, we protect the downside. And
now that we've covered the basics, let's dive into the core insurance activities. As you can see here, it covers everything from your home and vehicle to family protection.
We expand risk coverage here, which stabilizes the portfolio before the market instability inevitably begins to rise.
Protection is always purchased early.
As we move into the executive relocation patterns visualized here, notice the significant migration towards established hubs.
Relocation can signal jurisdictional strategy.
We analyze the initial trends and movement data, which brings us directly to the regulatory expectations outlined in the compliance guidelines. As you can see on the graph, speculative funding consistently decreases right before a tightening cycle begins. This trend is significant. It is critical that we prioritize these stability sectors highlighted in green. Moving into communication frequency, notice the sharp rise in efficiency for teams utilizing weekly meetings, peaking at 54% here in the center. As you can see, urgent internal messaging rises dramatically long before we see the corresponding organizational change.
We've moved from these communication shifts, seen here on the left, directly into the need for significant structural adjustment across the board.
Now, let's move into the critical phase, strategic withdrawals. By executing a quiet exit, we strategically protect the long-term valuation of the core assets, insulating them from market speculation. We often assume emotional withdrawal, but in reality, that is rarely the case. The data shows a different trend entirely. Looking closely at this data, you can see how the strategy dramatically impacts the compounded returns. Effective reinvestment timing is crucial.
This red peak represents the public fear index. Historically, reentry always occurs exactly when public fear is at its highest point.
As this graph illustrates, optimizing our reentry timing is directly correlated with maximizing our patient's advantage over time.
This brings us to the crucial topic of perception management. Look at how these nodes interconnect, influencing the narrative flow. Controlling the narrative is absolutely essential when it comes to protecting your assets. Narrative follows positioning.
This brings us to what I call the quiet expansion phase of the project.
Expansion resumes before the optimism headlines return. And this brings me to the core concept, the optimism lag. Because where others see a gap in optimism, we must see an opportunity for innovation.
This brings us to the crucial element of long-term contracts, the foundation of lasting success and partnership.
This upward trend clearly illustrates that longer contract durations are a direct reflection of increasing confidence in the partnership. When we look at short contracts versus long contracts, it becomes clear why we must exercise caution. This brings us to the critical area of infrastructure capital deployment, which is essential for global growth.
When facing uncertainty, the data is clear. Durable assets, highlighted here, consistently outperform.
The data consistently shows that focusing on asset durability, specifically in these areas, directly correlates to...
This brings us to the crucial element, our cross-border strategy for navigating global markets. We're connecting the major hubs efficiently. The key takeaway here is that the trend of global diversification inevitably precedes periods of heightened geopolitical tension.
As you can see, positioning absolutely must come first. It happens long before any public debate begins.
Transitioning now to the discipline of data interpretation, this is where we unlock the insights. Why do billionaires succeed where others fail? It's simple. They focus on the trend direction, not the daily headlines.
As you can see, when we apply consistent direction, the advantages don't just add up, they compound exponentially.
And here, as the signals fully synthesize, we see the culmination of our analysis, revealing the complete data pattern.
No single signal is decisive alone.
All these. Clusters create clarity. And with that, we move into today's main topic, awareness training. This is where we learn how to perceive and adapt to the rapid changes in our environment.
Consistency in observation is paramount. It ensures reliability in our data and validity in our conclusions. This is the foundation we must build upon. And this is why consistency is so critical. Because the moment you are consistent, you unlock the path to early recognition. Now, let's transition to the concept of risk asymmetry itself. Notice the imbalance. We're looking at higher risk here on the left.
Our strategy is clear. We prioritize reducing the downside risk here on the left, ensuring stability.
And now, risers. Safety precedes growth. And let's talk about discipline reinforcement. This isn't just the concept, it's the foundation for everything we do moving forward. The key takeaway here is that the emotional error prevention system prevents these issues by utilizing this interconnected network structure.
To ensure long-term dominance, we must understand how these systems interconnect. It is the integration of these networks that guarantees success.
While the data suggests progress, we have to address the growing wave of public misunderstanding reflected in these headlines.
And this is the crucial point. The world judges us solely on our outcomes, rarely on the effort we put in.
And this is the crucial point I want to clarify today. Preparation remains invisible.
This trend line demonstrates precisely how these signals work. They require patience, but the reward, as shown here, is substantial growth over time.
Headlines reward speed.
The contrast here is stark. We move from the vibrant saturation on the left to the muted tones you see reflected on the right. The key difference lies here. Reacting is problem-driven, whereas true positioning is opportunity-driven.
Readiness eliminates panic. Awareness creates calm control.
That concludes our lesson for today. Thank you for your engagement and attention, and it's been a pleasure. As you can see, signals are always present in our environment, constantly impacting how we perceive the world around us. And this is precisely the point. They are hidden by distraction.
The swirling chaos prevents us from seeing the individuals clearly.
So to summarize, by focusing on innovation and strategic partnerships, we are confident in our market growth potential and future outlook.
Wealth follows preparation. It is the single most important factor in securing your financial future.
Preparation follows observation.
So as we move towards the close of the session, I want to leave you with a few final reminders. By the time headlines appear, positioning is complete. The real advantage belongs to those who see quietly and act early.